"Please don't leave me alone tonight," said girl. And the rancher took her away. The night was cold and still, the kind of cold that crept into your bones, leaving you shivering even when you pulled your coat tight around your body. The stars hung high in the sky, sparkling like tiny diamonds, but down below, the world was dark and quiet. The silence of the night was broken only by the faint sounds of the wind moving through the trees. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. A young girl stood by a small, run-down cabin. Her clothes were torn, and her face was streaked with tears. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days, her eyes dull from exhaustion, her hands trembling. She didn't have anyone with her, no family, no friends, just the quiet and the darkness. Her heart felt like a stone in her chest, heavy and cold. She had been left here by those who should have cared for her. She didn't know where to go or who to turn to. The people who were supposed to protect her, to love her, had walked away, leaving her to face the world alone. She had hoped they would come back, that they would realize their mistake and return to take her home. But as the hours passed, the cold only deepened, and there was no sign of them. She felt abandoned, lost in a world that had turned its back on her. The cabin she stood by seemed more like a prison than a shelter, the walls closing in around her. She had no food, no warmth, nothing but the flickering hope that someone would come for her. But that hope was fading, replaced by a feeling of despair. As she looked around, her eyes scanned the empty road in front of her. There was nothing. No one. The world seemed as empty as she felt. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat, but it didn't help. The tears kept coming, and she wiped them away quickly, as if she could erase her pain just by brushing it aside. It was then that she heard the sound of hooves in the distance. The steady rhythm of the horse's steps echoed in the stillness of the night. She froze, straining her ears, hoping it was someone who could help her, someone who would take her away from this lonely place. The sound grew louder, and she turned toward it, her heart pounding in her chest. A figure appeared on horseback, riding slowly down the dirt road toward her. The rider's silhouette was dark against the moonlit sky, the horse moving with a steady, confident gait. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Was this the help she had been waiting for? Or was it just another person who would walk past her, leaving her to suffer alone? The rider drew closer, and she saw that it was a man, a rancher by the look of him. He was dressed in a weathered coat, his face rough from the years of hard work. His eyes, however, were soft. They seemed to take in everything around him, as though he saw more than what was just in front of him. The man's gaze landed on the girl, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was a kind of quiet understanding between them, as though they both knew the weight of the situation. The rancher slowed his horse to a stop in front of her. He looked down at her, noticing the tears in the way she was holding herself, as if she was trying to make herself smaller. His heart softened, and he spoke in a low, calm voice. "What happened?" he asked, his voice rough but kind. The girl blinked, unsure how to answer. She had been through so much, and yet the words felt like they were stuck in her throat. How could she explain all that had happened? How could she explain how she had ended up here, alone in the cold, with no one to turn to? I was left here," she said, her voice shaking. "By my family. They just left me." The rancher's face softened further, and he nodded slowly. He could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty that seemed to take hold of her every word. He had seen it before, in others who had been through hard times. He understood that look all too well.
"Are you alone?" he asked gently.
The girl nodded, her eyes downcast. She felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her, but she didn't have the strength to hide it. There was nothing left to hide. "I don't know where they went," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They just left me here. I don't know what to do." The rancher felt a tightness in his chest. He had lived a life of solitude, but he had never been in a position where he could ignore someone in need. He couldn't turn away from her, not when she was standing here, so vulnerable and alone.
"You don't need to be out here by yourself,"
he said firmly. "You're coming with me." The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She hadn't expected anyone to say that. She hadn't expected anyone to offer help, especially someone like him. She had thought that maybe she would have to stay here forever, hidden away in this forgotten cabin, waiting for a miracle that might never come. But now, there was someone here. Someone who was offering her a way out. But, "Where will I go?" she asked, still unsure. The rancher didn't hesitate. "I've got a ranch. You can stay there for as long as you need. It's not much, but it's safe. You won't be alone." The girl felt a rush of emotion surge through her. Relief, hope, even a little fear. She didn't know this man, didn't know where he was taking her, but something in his voice told her she could trust him. She nodded slowly, the weight of her despair lifting just a little. "Thank you," she whispered. The rancher nodded, then helped her onto his horse. He didn't say anything more as they rode through the night, the quiet hum of the horse's hooves providing the only sound. The girl clung to him, her arms wrapped around his waist, her body pressed close to his for warmth. It wasn't just the cold night air she was escaping from. It was the fear, the loneliness, the uncertainty that had followed her for so long. With each step the horse took, she felt a little lighter, a little more hopeful. Maybe this wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of something new. Maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. And as the rancher guided them through the darkness, he couldn't help but think that sometimes helping someone else was the best way to help yourself. The night was calm as the rancher led the horse through the darkened path, the quiet air filled with the sound of their steady movements. The girl sat behind him, holding tightly to the back of his coat, feeling the warmth from his body seep into her cold skin. She hadn't realized how cold she had been until now, until she was wrapped in the warmth of the rancher's presence. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel alone. As they rode, the girl's mind raced with thoughts and emotions that she could barely understand. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that wherever they were going, it was better than staying behind in that old abandoned cabin. The rancher's offer of a place to stay, a home, seemed too good to be true. It was a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. Hope. She tried to push away the questions that lingered in her mind. Who was this rancher? Why was he helping her? Was he really just a stranger offering kindness, or was there something more she didn't see? She could feel his presence beside her, steady and calm, but there was something about him that made her feel like she didn't need to ask. For once she could let go of her fears, even if just for a moment. The road beneath them grew rougher as they left the town behind, and the sounds of the world faded away. Only the rhythmic sound of the horse's hooves on the ground filled the air. The girl couldn't help but wonder about the rancher's life. What kind of man would offer help to someone like her? He was quiet, but his actions spoke louder than words. She had been so used to people turning their backs on her, to people ignoring her pain, that she didn't know how to respond to this unexpected kindness. All she had ever known was abandonment. The feeling of being unwanted, left behind like something that didn't matter. But now, this man was telling her she mattered. His actions were louder than anything he could have said. He was showing her, in a way, that people still cared. The girl leaned her head against the rancher's back, trying to find comfort in the steady rhythm of their ride. Her eyes closed for a moment, and for the first time in so long she let herself feel something other than fear. She felt safe. There was no fear of being abandoned, no worry about being left behind. The rancher's promise of a place to stay made her feel like maybe, just maybe, there was a future ahead for her. A future where she wasn't alone. The journey felt long, but the night sky was beautiful, with countless stars twinkling overhead and the moon casting a gentle light over the land. The quiet stillness of the night made everything seem peaceful, like the world was pausing for a moment to give them the time they needed. They traveled through the open fields, past empty barns and fences, and the girl felt herself relax just a little bit more with each passing mile. When they finally arrived at the ranch, the girl felt a rush of uncertainty. She hadn't expected to be here, in a place so far from the cabin where she had been abandoned. The ranch seemed quiet, with only the distant sound of animals and the wind rustling through the trees. The girl felt a pang of nervousness in her chest. What would happen now? What would life be like here? The rancher dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He reached up to help the girl down, his hand firm but gentle. As she stepped onto the earth, she felt the ground beneath her feet for the first time in hours. Her legs were stiff from sitting on the horse for so long, but there was something grounding about being on solid ground again. "Come on," the rancher said softly, motioning for her to follow him. "I'll show you where you can rest for the night." The girl nodded quietly, following him into the barn. It wasn't much, just a simple space with hay scattered on the ground and a few old blankets folded neatly in a corner. But to her, it felt like the most welcome place she could ever be. There was warmth here, and a sense of safety that she hadn't felt in so long. The rancher took a step toward the hay and laid out one of the blankets for her. "You can sleep here tonight," he said, his voice still calm and steady. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what you need." She sat down on the blanket, the softness beneath her providing a surprising comfort. The rancher didn't sit beside her. Instead, he stood for a moment, looking out the barn door into the night. He didn't speak, but the girl could sense he was lost in thought. She wondered what was going through his mind. Was he just being kind, or was there more to it? He turned back to her after a moment and smiled softly. "You should try to get some rest," he said, his voice gentle. "It's been a long day for both of us." The girl nodded, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to close her eyes. The rancher hadn't asked her to explain herself, hadn't pushed her to share the painful details of what had happened. He hadn't demanded answers. He had simply offered her a place to sleep and some peace, something she hadn't thought she'd ever find again. As she lay there in the quiet barn, listening to the soft sounds of the animals nearby, the girl allowed herself to believe that this might be a new beginning, a place where she could heal, where she could feel safe again. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, she had something that had always seemed out of reach: hope. The rancher stood in the doorway, watching over her for a moment before he turned and disappeared into the night. The girl didn't ask him where he was going, nor did she need to. She trusted him, even though she didn't know him. There was something about the way he treated her, with quiet care and respect, that made her feel like maybe she wasn't as alone as she had always thought. In the silence of the barn, with only the sounds of the wind and the animals surrounding her, the girl fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. It wasn't the sleep of someone who was hiding from the world, but the sleep of someone who was beginning to heal. Someone who had found a place where they could be safe. And for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. The morning arrived with the soft light of the sun creeping through the cracks in the barn's wooden walls. The girl woke up slowly, her body stiff from the hard surface beneath her, but there was a warmth in the air that made her feel more comfortable than she had in days. She sat up, stretching her arms and legs, trying to shake off the tiredness that still clung to her. The sound of birds outside, the rustling of hay, and the distant noises of the ranch felt different today. Less lonely, less frightening. For a moment she just sat there, taking it all in. It was strange to feel safe again, like she had finally found a place where she could breathe without fear. The night had been peaceful, the ranch quiet and calm. She had slept longer than she expected, and for once she didn't have nightmares chasing her thoughts. She didn't wake up in a panic, looking for a way to escape. She simply woke up and realized that for now she was here. She was safe. The barn door creaked open, and the rancher stepped in, his boots making a soft sound as he walked across the floor. He glanced over at the girl, who was still sitting on the blanket, and gave her a kind smile. "How did you sleep?" he asked, his voice low and warm. The girl hesitated, unsure of how to respond. He had never been asked how she was feeling before, not like this, with someone who genuinely cared to know. She had grown used to pretending everything was fine, to hiding the truth from people who didn't really want to understand. But the rancher didn't seem like he was expecting some carefully crafted answer. He was simply offering a chance for her to share, if she wanted to. "I slept better than I have in a long time," she said quietly, her voice still a little unsure. "It was peaceful here. I don't feel so alone." The rancher nodded, his expression softening. That's good to hear. Everyone deserves a place where they can feel at peace. He paused for a moment, looking around the barn as if gathering his thoughts. Then he looked back at her. I have some work to do on the ranch today, but I thought I'd show you around. Let you see where you can stay while you're here. The girl nodded, feeling a flicker of curiosity. She had no idea what to expect from this place. All she knew was that it was different from everything she had left behind. Different in a way that made her feel like she could trust it. She followed the rancher outside, stepping into the sunlight for the first time that day. The air was crisp and fresh, and the open sky seemed to stretch on forever. As they walked through the ranch, the girl couldn't help but notice how quiet everything was. The fields were vast and empty, with only the occasional bird flying overhead or the sound of a distant animal. The ranch was simple, with a few wooden fences, a barn, and a small house where the rancher likely lived. There were no crowds, no hustle and bustle of city life. It was peaceful here, the kind of quiet that made everything feel like it had its place in the world. This is where I live, the rancher said, motioning toward the small house. It's not much, but it's enough for me. The girl looked up at the house, taking in the modest building. It wasn't anything grand, but there was something comforting about it. The rancher's home was clean, with a small porch where he had a couple of chairs set up. There was a well in the corner of the yard, and a few tools leaned against the side of the house. It was simple, just like him, but there was a warmth to it that made the girl feel welcome. This is where you'll be staying for now, the rancher continued, pointing to a small cabin near the house. It was even simpler than the main house, just a single room with a small bed, a table, and a window that let in the light. It wasn't fancy, but it had a charm of its own. The girl stepped inside, looking around. The cabin was cozy in a way she hadn't expected. The bed was covered with a clean blanket, and there was a small chair by the window. The walls were made of wood, the kind of wood that smelled fresh and earthy. It was a place she could call her own, even if just for a while. This will be yours, the rancher said, standing in the doorway. You can rest here when you need to. I'll help you get set up with anything else you might need. The girl stood in the center of the room, her eyes scanning every detail. She felt a strange sense of gratitude building inside her, a feeling she hadn't had in so long. It was overwhelming, like her heart was swelling with something she didn't know how to express. Thank you, she said softly, turning toward the rancher. I didn't think I would ever have something like this again. The rancher gave her a small, reassuring smile. Everyone deserves a second chance. You don't have to worry about anything here. Just take things one day at a time. The girl nodded, trying to hold back the emotions that were threatening to surface. She wasn't used to kindness, to people offering help without asking for anything in return. She had been through so much, and the thought of truly starting over felt both freeing and terrifying. Is there anything I can do to help? She asked, her voice a little stronger now. It was a simple question, but it held more meaning than she realized. She wasn't used to being asked what she could do. Most people just expected her to stay quiet and keep out of the way. But here, with the rancher, it felt different. It felt like she had a purpose, even if it was just a small one. The rancher thought for a moment, then nodded. I could use some help with the chores around the ranch. It's a lot of work, but it's better when there are two people to do it. I'll show you what needs to be done, and you can decide if you want to help. The girl agreed, eager to be of use, to feel like she was part of something again. She followed the rancher to the barn, where he showed her how to feed the animals, how to clean up the stables, and how to take care of the land. It wasn't easy work, but it was honest work, and the more she worked alongside the rancher, the more she felt a sense of belonging. The days passed in a blur of work and quiet moments shared between the two of them. They didn't talk much, but there was a comfort in their silence, a mutual understanding that grew stronger each day. The girl started to feel like she was part of something real, something that wasn't going to disappear the moment she let her guard down. She had been so afraid of being alone, so afraid that she would never find a place to call home again. But now, with the rancher's quiet kindness and the steady rhythm of life on the ranch, she was beginning to believe that maybe, Just maybe she had found her place. As the days turned into weeks, the girl slowly began to heal. The weight of her past didn't disappear, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. She was learning to trust again, not just in others, but in herself. She had made it through the worst of her fear, and now she was finding something new, something she had never known before. The days continued to blend into one another, and with each passing moment, the girl felt herself becoming more accustomed to the routine of life on the ranch. At first, she had been overwhelmed by the unfamiliar tasks and the unfamiliar surroundings, but now they felt like a rhythm she could understand. The rancher's presence remained steady and calm, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. His quiet kindness had become a part of her daily life, and she had come to rely on it more than she ever expected. The girl had started to take on more responsibilities around the ranch. She helped with the animals, fed the chickens, and even started working with the horses, learning how to care for them. Each task was a small step, but it felt like a victory. Every time she accomplished something, no matter how small, she felt a little more confident in herself, a little less broken. But she had begun to see herself as someone capable of taking care of others, of being a part of something bigger than herself. The rancher had been patient with her, never rushing her or expecting more than she could give. He had shown her how to handle the animals with care, how to move with purpose, how to take pride in the work that needed to be done. At first she had hesitated, unsure of whether she was really up for it, but the rancher's encouragement was enough to keep her going. He never once made her feel like she wasn't good enough, and that, in itself, was a gift. One afternoon after a long day of work, the girl sat on the porch of the small cabin the rancher had shown her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the fields, and she felt a sense of calm settle over her. It had been a long time since she had felt like this, at peace, in a place where she wasn't constantly afraid of what the next moment would bring. She took a deep breath, savoring the simplicity of the moment. The rancher came out of the house and sat down beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just sat in silence, watching the sunset with her. There was something about the stillness between them that was comforting. It was as if they didn't need to fill the silence with words. The quiet spoke volumes, and in it, the girl found a kind of peace she hadn't known she needed. "Do you ever miss the noise?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. The rancher glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember why I chose this life. The quiet helps me think, helps me feel at home." The girl nodded, taking in his words. She understood. She had never known a life like this, one filled with such simplicity and peace. But now, as she sat there beside him, she realized that this was the life she had been searching for. It wasn't about the noise or the chaos that had once filled her life. It was about the stillness, the quiet moments, the sense of belonging. Over the next few weeks, the girl continued to grow, both in confidence and in strength. The rancher had been right when he told her to take things one day at a time. Slowly but surely, she was finding her way back to herself. She had started to find joy in the small things, the way the wind felt against her skin, the satisfaction of a job well done, the warmth of the sun on her face. She had learned to appreciate the simplicity of life on the ranch, and in doing so, she had learned to appreciate herself. One afternoon, as the girl was brushing down one of the horses, the rancher came over to her. He had been working on the fence, his sleeves rolled up and his hands covered in dirt, but he had a look of determination on his face. "You've been doing a great job with the animals," he said, his voice steady. "I think it's time you learned how to ride." The girl looked up at him, surprised. "Ride?" The rancher nodded. "It's important to know how to work with the horses. They're a big part of the ranch, and if you're going to stay here, I want you to know how to care for them properly."
The girl felt a mixture of excitement and fear.
She had always admired horses from a distance, but she had never ridden one before. The thought of getting on such a powerful animal was both thrilling and terrifying. But she trusted the rancher, and she knew that if he believed she could do it, maybe she could. He led her to one of the horses, a strong chestnut mare that was calm but had a certain grace about her. The rancher helped her mount, steadying her as she settled into the saddle. She felt a rush of nervousness, her heart pounding in her chest, but the rancher's calm presence made her feel more at ease. He was patient with her, showing her how to hold the reins, how to sit straight in the saddle, and how to give the horse gentle commands. At first the horse was slow, just walking around the small paddock. The girl's nerves eased with each step, and she began to feel more confident. She followed the rancher's instructions, her body adjusting to the rhythm of the horse's movements. There was something magical about the connection between her and the horse, something that made her feel free, like she could go anywhere. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ranch, the girl rode in circles, her laughter ringing out in the quiet evening air. She felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years. The fear that had once gripped her heart was gone, replaced by a feeling of accomplishment and joy. She was doing it. She was riding, and she was doing it well. The rancher watched from the sidelines, a proud smile on his face. He had known all along that the girl had the strength inside her, that she had the capacity to heal and to grow. He had seen it in her from the very beginning, and now he could see the change in her, how she had blossomed, how she had found her place. When she finally dismounted, the girl looked at him, her eyes bright with excitement. "I did it," she said, her voice full of wonder. The rancher nodded. "You did." For a moment they stood in silence, watching the horses graze in the distance, the world around them still and peaceful. The girl felt a sense of pride swelling inside her, not just because she had ridden the horse, but because she had come so far. She had been lost and broken, unsure of where to go or who to turn to. But now she was standing tall, ready to face whatever came next. "I'm glad I found you," she said quietly, her voice full of sincerity. The rancher turned to her, his expression softening. "I'm glad you found your way here." And at that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the girl realized that she had found more than just a place to stay. She had found herself. The mornings had become something the girl looked forward to. The routine was steady now, and she no longer felt like a stranger in this place. Life on the ranch had given her a sense of purpose she had long forgotten. It wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about the small moments, the quiet conversations, the understanding that came with simply being present in the same space as someone who cared. The ranch had become more than a place of refuge. It had become a place of growth. One morning, as the girl was feeding the chickens, the rancher approached her. He was carrying a small bundle of hay and a bucket of water for the horses. The sky above was a soft shade of blue, and the air felt cool and fresh. The barn was alive with the sounds of the animals, but there was a calm in the air, an unspoken peace that seemed to hang over everything. "Morning," the rancher said, his voice low and steady. "I thought we could take a walk today. There's something I want to show you." The girl paused, glancing up at him. She had grown used to their routine of work, but the idea of a walk, just the two of them, was different. It felt like a chance to talk, to get to know each other better in a way that wasn't about chores or tasks. It felt like an opportunity to connect, not just as worker and helper, but as two people who had become something more. She smiled and nodded. "I'd like that." They left the barn together, walking slowly through the open fields. The girl had been on this land for weeks now, but it still amazed her how vast it was. The ranch stretched for miles, the horizon endless, and filled with rolling hills. It was a landscape she had never known, a far cry from the small, crowded spaces she had once lived in. Here, there was room to breathe, room to think, room to feel like she had a place in the world. As they walked, the rancher didn't say much at first. He seemed content in the silence, as if he knew that sometimes words weren't necessary. The girl followed beside him, taking in the peaceful beauty of the land around them. The soft rustle of the wind in the trees, the distant sound of the creek flowing through the valley, the birds flying high above. It all felt so calming. It was as if the land itself was whispering a secret of peace and quiet, a secret that only those who took the time to listen could understand. After a while, the rancher spoke. "I wanted to show you something I've been working on." He motioned ahead, where a small grove of trees stood in the distance. "I've been planting some new trees here. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but I never had the chance before." The girl's eyes followed his gaze to the grove. She hadn't noticed it before, but now that he pointed it out, she could see the young saplings growing there, their branches reaching toward the sky. It was a small grove, but it had potential, just like everything else on the ranch. She nodded, intrigued. It looks beautiful. What kind of trees are they? Apple trees, he said. I've always wanted to grow them. They take time to mature, but in a few years they'll start bearing fruit. It'll be a while before they're fully grown, but I think it'll be worth the wait. The girl smiled, understanding the significance of what he was saying. It wasn't just about the trees. It was about the hope, the patience, and the belief that something good would come if you nurtured it long enough. She had seen the rancher's quiet dedication to his work, but now she saw it in a new light. This wasn't just about planting trees or tending animals. This was about creating something lasting, something that would grow and thrive over time. She looked at him, a new understanding in her eyes. You've worked hard for this, haven't you? The rancher met her gaze and nodded.
I have. It's been a long road, but it's been worth it.
Sometimes you have to put in the work and wait for the results. The girl took a deep breath, the words resonating with her more than she expected. She had spent so much of her life running, hiding, trying to escape the pain. But here, on this land with this man, she had found something different. She had found a place where she could put down roots, where she could heal, where she could be part of something bigger than herself. They continued walking through the grove, the soft crunch of the earth beneath their feet the only sound between them. The girl's mind wandered, but not in a way that was filled with fear or uncertainty. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel anxious about what would happen next. She wasn't constantly questioning what her future would hold. Here with the rancher, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. They stopped at the edge of the grove, looking out over the fields. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm golden light over everything. The girl's thoughts drifted to the life she had left behind. The pain, the loneliness, the feeling of being unwanted. It all felt so far away now, as if it belonged to someone else. She had built a new life here, one step at a time, and it had become her reality. She was no longer that lost, scared girl in the cabin. She was someone who had found her place. The rancher stood beside her, looking out over the land, his expression peaceful. He didn't say anything, but his presence spoke volumes. He had offered her more than just a place to stay. He had given her the chance to start over, to heal, to become someone she could be proud of. She didn't need to say anything. He knew, he understood. For a moment they simply stood there, taking in the view, feeling the quiet serenity of the land around them. The girl had no words, no questions. She just let the moment wash over her, the peace of it settling deep into her bones. As the sun finally sank below the horizon, casting the world into twilight, the rancher turned to her. "Let's head back," he said quietly. The girl nodded, and together they made their way back toward the house. As they walked side by side, she felt a sense of contentment that she hadn't known in years. This place, this ranch, had become her home. The rancher had become more than just someone who had helped her. He had become someone she trusted, someone who had shown her the power of patience, the value of hard work, and the beauty of starting over. When they arrived back at the house, the rancher paused for a moment and looked at her. "I'm proud of how far you've come," he said, his voice sincere. "You've worked hard to get here, and you've earned your place." The girl's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time she felt truly at home. She had found a place where she could heal, where she could grow, and where she could be a part of something lasting. The ranch was more than just land and animals. It was a home, and it was hers. As the evening settled in and the stars began to twinkle above, the girl knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The future was hers to shape, and with each passing day, she was growing stronger, more confident, and more at peace. Whatever came next, she was ready for it.